I was like addicted to Diet Pepsi. I was drinking probably like an ungodly amount of Diet Pepsi every day. And I was like, I gotta quit it, you know?
And I'm going to tell, this is the first one I've ever liked.
Oh, well, thank you.
Your next favorite podcast pick starts now. Here's the Professor and Heather Ann.
Welcome to
The Professor and Heather Ann.
Although we don't have all the answers, we hope to encourage and excite you. We're here sharing our lives to inspire you to make the most of the second half of your life.
Ooh.
Cheers.
Oh, that's very tasty. I like that. It's very tasty. In today's episode, we sit down with Rashel Hudson, a powerhouse entrepreneur, single mom of 5, domestic violence survivor, self-made businesswoman who turned her pain into purpose.
This episode is a must listen for single moms, survivors, visionaries, and anyone who feels like the cards are stacked against them. Your past does not define your future. You do. So, we're going to start by recounting it in brief outline form your childhood experiences. We've talked about them on previous episodes, but not everyone has heard those episodes, and it's an important sort of a preface to today's episode. So, you can briefly describe, Heather, what you went through.
So I grew up in trauma. My dad was very abusive to my mom, was very abusive to us. We, as kids, were locked in our rooms. It could be for hours, it could be for days. A lot of times we weren't given food. The same thing with being able to go to the restroom. And it just progressed. We learned at a very early age. By the time I was 6 or 7 years old, I knew that the police were no longer going to be able to help us. It wasn't something back then that they could be arrested for, even though we were black and blue and my mom was black and blue. So we just learned to hide it, live our secrets behind our closed doors until my senior year of high school when my mom and dad met up. They had already separated for a few months. She was finally, after 26 years of marriage, trying to end it. And he came after her one last time. And so she wound up, he was pronounced dead at the scene. She was arrested and she spent the rest of her life in prison. And it was something that I was really ashamed of for a long time and kept secret, even though we were front page news and even made national news. It was just something I was embarrassed and ashamed. And when we moved to Oklahoma, I thought, hey, what a perfect opportunity.
To leave it all behind.
Because I wouldn't have to share my secret. Nobody would have to know until one day I was up at the Capitol and just kind of blurted everything out. And that just kind of changed the trajectory of my life and in my family's life. And all of that has brought us here today for us being able to do this podcast and have the different type of guests that we've been honored to have. And I'm very honored to have our guest today. We'd like to welcome our guest, Rashel Hudson, founder and owner of Firefly Kombucha, Oklahoma's first kombucha brewery. She has an incredible story. Overcoming childhood trauma, domestic violence, poverty, and turning her pain into passion. With zero outside funding, she launched her kombucha company just a few years ago and scaled it into $1 million company. She's passionate about helping people find healthy alternatives to drinking soda and alcohol.
Rashel, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Certainly. We're very, very pleased to talk with you this morning. I wonder if you could start by telling us about your childhood and the challenges you faced.
Yeah, I grew up in a two-parent household. My parents were married for 18 long years. My dad was very religious and strict, and really focused on what he thought was like his purpose in life. And my mom was a very submissive, traditional wife in that sense, and kind of let my dad lead the home. And so in our younger years, I don't remember a lot of my younger years. Trauma is fun that way. It has a way of protecting you when you're a child. And so my furthest back memory isn't until I'm about 7 years old. But you know, in the most sense, it was a pretty what we thought was a normal household when we were younger. Things didn't really become seen in another light until I hit my preteen years. And, you know, I was just a very driven kid, even at like 11 years old. You know, I had all these interests and things that I really wanted to do. And we weren't really like poured into individually as kids. We were just kind of a byproduct of their life. And so a lot of frustration came from that. And when you're frustrated and you're 11, 12, 13, you know, that can transpire in some not so wonderful ways and behaviors. And my dad had a temper. He still, you know, struggles with a temper that he can't control. And I just really brought that out in him more so than my younger siblings did. And he was really abusive to me, and, you know, verbally and physically. And I think I know that just created your typical daddy issue situation. So
do you think, I know for me, that was about the time I started having issues, more so with my dad. My middle sister, by the time she was 12, she was already addicted to drugs, running the streets, selling, and all of that. And she took a brunt of a lot of the abuse when she was home, but when she was out of the house, I took the brunt of a lot of that. But did you start paying attention to your friends' households and that it was different than yours? And did that start making, I know for me, hanging out with my friends and stuff, it started putting things into my head of, everybody doesn't live the way I live.
Yeah.
And their parents are loving, and there's not a lot of yelling, and there's no hitting. And so I found at that age, I started pushing back more at my dad, like standing up to him more, trying to get my independence because I knew I wanted something different.
Yes, I would say for sure, especially now looking back, maybe I didn't know exactly in that moment where that pushback was coming from. But I've definitely, you know, always just been pre-wired to be the person that's going to push back when something isn't right or I want something different, you know? And I know that I had that even in me as a young child. And so for sure, I think that had a lot to do with it.
Did you do sports? Band?
No, I mean, you know, that takes a lot of parental support. I know that being a sports mom, you know, that is not something you can just decide you want to be a youth athlete, you know. And so very athletic, but no, never played any actual sports or did anything extracurricular. So we didn't have, you know, another creative outlet.
So I was fortunate that I had great coaches. I was in band. I did do all the sports and stuff. I just had to figure out how to get to practices and home and, you know, all of that stuff. So I know that was a driving force for me that I was going to have a better life.
Yeah.
What was it in you that just, I mean, we're going to talk more about obviously what you've built, but what do you think was your driving force to get you here today?
I don't know if I knew really what it was. I just knew that, like, I was supposed to do something, you know, something way better than where I was at or what I was doing or what I was being offered. And I don't think I really knew what it was. I just knew that it was there. You know, I couldn't ignore it. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration on my end came from, because it was like, you know, why isn't anybody helping me figure this out? And so, you know, it was me figuring it out, and it took a while.
And it does. It unfortunately does take us a while, especially those of us who grew up in that kind of trauma.
Yes.
So you made it through your preteens, and you're starting to push back to your dad. So what happens next?
I started living with other friends and whatnot when I was about 15, you know, and then when my parents split, all of my other two siblings also went to live with some friends, and my mom just kind of went off the deep end. And so I stayed in high school, and I worked at one point 2 jobs through high school, and was with my boyfriend at the time, and lived with him when I wasn't living with friends anymore, and just kind of hopped around, and ended up getting pregnant in my senior year. It's a whole nother story, but not by the boyfriend that I was living with. And so that relationship, you know, became pretty abusive after he came back from a tour of Afghanistan to, you know, a fiance that had cheated on him and pregnant with someone else's child. And then he was dealing with a lot of PTSD, which back then was still not really talked about or dealt with. And so his mental health and then, you know, drug use, ultimately, really is what, ended up, you know, becoming the breaking point of, the abuse going so far. And then I finally, left. But in that relationship, you know, he wanted to stay with me even though I was pregnant. And my mom was killed in a DUI accident just a couple of months before I had him, and I gave him up for adoption. I went through several adoption agencies and interviewed parents and picked out his parents and let them be a part of the last half of my pregnancy, and gave him to them, you know, at the hospital when I gave birth to him, and then went back home and graduated high school 2 months later. So I got through those years, but it was a lot that happened during that time. And I still had never really dealt with, you know, the childhood trauma. And then on top of it, had those major events pile on. And so
it was the same with me. It happened, the accident with my parents happened senior year.
Wow.
And still to this day, I know a lot of it had to do with the pushback and stuff in me, and that I was going to make it, but I barely graduated high school too.
Oh, me too.
Not that I didn't have all my credits and all that stuff. I had one lousy class that for some reason I thought going to government at 0 period would make sense with all the trauma I was dealing with that senior year.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that with us. I fully understand having to make it through that. And did you have anybody did you have counselors? Did you have anybody just encouraging you?
I had the most, you know, random people that you wouldn't have seen coming. I had some really great teachers. I remember one of my teachers, her husband was actually the attorney that took the case for the wrongful death lawsuit for the guy who killed my mom. And, you know, my principals at the time. And I was blessed with some really great friends whose parents were just like phenomenal. And were really there for me and poured into me. And still to this day, you know, they were like, we always knew you'd, you know, do something great and that you had that in you. And so it's been really cool. But I would say it was strangers, you know, it was not my blood family. My grandparents were there for me as much as they could be, but they lived in Kansas. But other than that, it was just strangers that, you know, God put in my life.
So part of what Heather has been alluding to is this, it's this, a theory in psychology that contrasts the effects of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, with the ameliorative effects of PACEs, protective and compensatory experiences. And there's these questionnaires that will measure both things. And so,
and so ACEs is all the adverse things that have happened to you, and that's everything that you've been through. Obviously, with your ex-boyfriend and all of that trauma happening just your senior year. Then the PACEs, I say it's more like the positive things, and that's all the people that showed up in your life and people that you did not expect. Because it was the same thing for me. I didn't have counselors asking me, we were front page news, so it wasn't like I was hiding this from anybody. Everybody knew what was going on. I actually started my senior year in high school with my mom in county jail because her bond was set too high. And so I didn't have anybody, but every once in a while I just have a parent come up to me and just, are you okay? Is there, nope, I'm fine. Everything's good. That's the one thing that I find when you're a child growing up in trauma. It's always, I'm fine. Everything's good. Even though everything wasn't.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So after you graduated from high school, then how did things progress?
Yeah, I went on to, work some jobs, and then went to Haskell Indian Nations for business. I didn't graduate, as all geniuses do. I dropped out. I
dropped out of college.
Yeah, and came back home and was bartending and ended up getting with my ex-husband, my 2 biological kids' dad, and we got pregnant very quickly with Kinley, and got married. And at the time, he was in drug court, which should have been sign number 1. But he was, doing well and was clean and sober and following the program. And not long after we got married, he graduated from drug court and started drinking and using again, and became very abusive and dealt with a lot of schizophrenic reactions through his drug use, which created some really crazy situations that were very, very dangerous. And when we had another child, Sydney, and when she was 3 months old, their dad had woken up from a drunken sleep and had, some thought in his head that he thought was true, that I had done something, and ultimately ended up, he held me down and headbutted my face open pretty badly. And I managed to, wait till he fell back asleep and get both kids and left in the middle of the night, and I pressed charges, and he went back to jail for a while because he had priors. And so, through that process, he had beat me to filing for divorce, and dragged it out for 7 years, and on purpose, and would tell me, I'm not going to let you divorce me. And the mental and emotional abuse continued even while he was in jail and then in rehab, even though the physical was, not a possibility anymore.
And I often say, and even for myself, it's the mental that's the hardest, because bruises heal.
Yeah.
And, cuts and all of that, broken bones, they all heal. But it's that mental that just wears you down more than anything.
It sure does. It sure does. And my ex-husband ended up being more mentally abusive than he was physically, even though it turned physical towards the end. And I think that those were, he came in right at a very vulnerable time when I was finally breaking free from my first husband. It was a slow progression. And then once it got there, it was really, really bad, but it was a different kind of evil than I had known before. And it was way more of a mental and emotional abuse, and a very, very intense and frequently shifting one. He was eventually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and then he was a raging alcoholic and then a meth user on top of it. And so things got physical when he was using meth, but everything else was just an everyday
So how did you get out of that situation? What was the final point, and how did you escape that?
Yeah, the final point was he had already done a stint in rehab, and then came back home, and I had to have a back surgery, and I had back surgery, and I think I was only a couple of days out of back surgery and a back brace, and he had a fit, as I would like to call it, over like a hoodie not being in the dryer or something crazy. And he tossed me around while I was in my back brace. And then, there was a ginormous explosion that morning. It was time for the kids to go to school, so the kids were all there. And he ended up, throwing a metal cup at one of the kids, and it missed the kid, but went through a window. And it was a very huge, most of his explosions were huge. But that was the last straw for me, and that was in late December of 2019. So I've been free of all that now for, going on 6 years.
And this is obviously something that you've had to work through on your own.
Yeah.
So you've had counseling, you've had therapy and stuff, but I also know for the kids, and I know for me, I had, when my boys were old enough, I had to be open and honest. One of the reasons why is they could Google and see about their own grandmother. It was, it was out there for the world to see. So how did you help your kids through this whole process?
I started with myself. I really believe in the theory of like heal the parent, heal the child. I don't think it carries it the entire way, but I think it's like an amazing starting point, or maybe the only starting point, because, to try to help them heal something that you refuse to address within yourself is kind of an oxymoron. And so I just really dove deep. I started talk therapy, and then I did some hypnotherapy. I really worked on learning how to rewire my brain, and just, focus on what I did want the end result to be, not what the result was right now, and how to get there. And I think that doing some of that work before they started talk therapy really showed them kind of the framework of, this is how we're going to get past this, and we're going to, live a different life and have a better life and have peace. And it's possible, but we have to do a lot of work. So, yeah.
So how did we go from healing yourself and everything to being an entrepreneur? What drove you? What decided on the type of business that you wanted? And
I've always been a hustler of sorts. And that's really how I survived my younger years, was just figuring out ways to make ends meet, and always coming up with creative ways to make extra money. And when I went through that divorce, I was obviously still on a back brace, and I also needed a reconstructive knee surgery that they were trying to put off for a while, but I ended up having 3 months after my back surgery. So I was pretty limited on what I could do. And I had already been making our elderberry potion that we still make today, just for my kids and my family. I'd been doing it for a couple of years at that point. And I started making it because I couldn't find anything on the market that I liked, or that anybody was making locally the right way. And when I decide to really dive into something, I really dive into it. So I basically became an herbalist and a scientist and all these things, and studied oxidation and learned how to handle each herb so that way the healing properties stay intact, and, so it can really do what it was intended to do. And so I started making our own, and it was delicious and it was great. And it's still the same recipe today that we started with then. And so I was sitting there one day, not long after all of this had happened, and I'm just like, what am I going to do? I have no support. I have my 2 biological kids, but I had also gotten custody of my stepdaughter, who is the same age as Kinley. So they're both 14 now. So I had her as well. And I didn't know how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to... And I'm very resourceful, which thankfully my life had built me for that. So I pulled some resources. My tribe really helped us a lot. It kind of helped, even though it was a horrible time that COVID was going on. There was a lot of extra help out there. And I was considered disabled, but that was about a 1.5 year wait before I received any disability benefits. And same thing with like housing assistance. We were on a waiting list for a long time and finally got Section 8 housing and didn't have to move. But in the meantime, I was just doing everything I could, and I was sitting there, and it was like, I just need to start a business with this product. I was like, I hate to take advantage of a horrible situation, the fact that we're dealing with COVID, but I know that, when we never got it, and my kids still went to public school, and I was just dosing them with elderberry all the time. And any other kid that came over to the house. I'm just like, take a shot. I promise it's not alcohol. And so, I really wanted to share that with my community first. And so that's where I posted, I made a post on our local Chit Chat page, and we sold a couple of cases that first weekend. And, it was so rewarding to have people come back and say, oh my gosh, that got me better so quick, or it kept my kids from getting sick when I was already sick. Just all the feedback was just like, wow, I can really help people in this way. And that felt good. And so I just ran with it. And then I started making fire cider not long after that, which is our fermented apple cider vinegar elixir. And so then I dove into the science of fermentation, and I just got it, like right off the bat. It just made sense to me. And then not long after that, I, had been kicking one bad habit at a time. And my next one that I really wanted to kick was I was like addicted to Diet Pepsi. I was drinking probably like an ungodly amount of Diet Pepsi every day. And I was like, I got to quit it, And I picked up a kombucha, and I thought, oh, I think I could do that, And so for a while, I was drinking like 6 or 7, 8 kombuchas a day. I'd call it getting booched out. You'd feel real good. But I kicked my pop habit. And then I, the more I started to become obsessed with kombucha and look at all the brands and ingredients and the science behind the fermentation process of kombucha, I was like, I think I could do this better. And so I got a SCOBY from a lifelong friend of ours and gave it a go. And it was really good. My first go around, and we still make, the flavor you're drinking was one of our flagship flavors.
I really like this. So this is elderberry, lemon, and ginger. Mm-hmm. I really like that.
Can you, for listeners who know nothing about kombucha, just like describe briefly what it is, what is a SCOBY?
Yeah. So the SCOBY is a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria. So it's what actually it takes the sugar. Everything starts off as a sweet tea blend, and the SCOBY, eats the sugar and turns it into the probiotic and tangy raw kombucha. So by the time we flavor raw kombucha, there's no sugar left. It's been transformed into billions of cultures of like very pure probiotics. And so, it's made a lot like a craft beer, but it's non-alcoholic. So we use a lot of the same equipment. We are technically a brewery.
That's what I was going to say, because you're called a brewery.
Yeah, because we very much are a brewery. And when you tour and you see our vessels and everything, and you'll see that it's no different than a beer brewery setup. We just have different ingredients and slightly different processes. And, we're making an NA product that's good for your gut health. So it's lightly carbonated, gives you a little bit of caffeine, but overall will make you feel real good.
And I'm actually reading the ingredients here. So, this is all natural ingredients. Yeah. There's no chemicals or anything that we're all hearing about nowadays. No. And
it's all organic. We use organic whole ingredients. So we're not using, essence of something or even like a fruit concentrate or a syrup. Or when we say there's ginger in there, there's ground up organic ginger that we did ourselves,
And explain a little bit more about even the benefits of it. You were able to get off pop yourself, and you have had several surgeries, so recovering from those surgeries and everything. What exactly does it help with your body?
It's packed with antioxidants, which is great for inflammation. And inflammation, if you know anything about what inflammation does to the body, it just wreaks havoc, and it is like the root cause of so much. So, my goal was, well, if I can get rid of the inflammation that's in my body, then my body can go back to a state of homeostasis and heal itself, which the body wants to heal itself. We just have to get it in the right position to be able to do so. And so, the elderberry also is packed with antioxidants and boosts your immune system. And then the fire cider is packed with every mineral and vitamin you can think of from organic whole foods, and then prebiotics, and tons of antioxidants. So between those three, I was feeling real good. And I went and got some I can't remember the exact term for it, but basically it's where they put in a wave of electricity through your body, and it reads the health of your organs and all these other things. What is that called? I can't remember the exact term of it, but I'll think of it later probably. But I did a scan, and she was like, it is insane that you have no inflammation in your body, especially with the surgeries that you've had. And it was just a telltale sign to me that I had done something right and I was able to heal.
And it's not just the surgery. So I've been doing a lot of studying and everything, healing my body and all that stuff. And one of the things I found out growing up in trauma, that automatically
For sure.
increases our cortisol,
Yes.
which automatically increases the inflammation.
Yeah.
So for you not to have any inflammation after years of trauma and then surgeries and stuff is amazing.
Yeah. And not that some hasn't come back at times, because for sure, I've had waves of having to, address what the next thing. Because as you know, when you start to heal, it's like, an onion, and you just pull back layers and you think you're good until you realize you have something else to deal with.
There's something else that you have to deal with.
Hey, let's go. Yeah. And so I think that's why people call it a healing journey, even though that's come to be kind of like a cheesy term. It's not, because
it is a journey.
It's a journey, and everybody's is different. But you have to just be okay with the fact that it's a journey and it may never end, but it's definitely a way better journey than the one lived before.
So how did you come about? I am a mortgage lender, and so I deal with mortgages and loans, and I work with a lot of self-employed people. So how did you come about? I mean, this is a fabulous building.
Thank you.
You've got this brewery. You're opening soon. And how did you come up with the financing and all of this to be able to do this?
Well, in the beginning, from 2020 to 2024, I bootstrapped it. I literally took my food stamps and what assistance I was getting and bought the supplies for the business, and then just poured everything back in as much as I could. And when I finally did get my disability benefits, I was able to take that and purchase our little food truck that we called our wellness wagon. Oh. And it's still out in the lot. I'll have to show you guys. And so we, took that around to farmers markets and stuff. And then in February of 2024, I landed private investors. And I began with the end in mind way back in 2020. So I had quite the extravagant plan on how I wanted to expand and what the end goal was. So when I did have the opportunity to pitch to them, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and what to ask for.
So it's your business plan, you had the numbers, you knew exactly this is what I can do.
Yeah, well, the fun thing about a new business plan is there's no, exact numbers. Everything is a guesstimate based off of data. And I picked an industry that's a little weird, and there's not a lot of data on in the U.S. yet, And so I had limited data at the time, but with what I had and my best educated guesses, I knew what I was going to do if I, got the money. And so for the longest time, the funding was the hard part for me, but I just kept going because I knew it was going to come. So, yeah.
Am I right that Oklahoma, compared to other states, has a fairly light, regulatory regime with regard to foods and so forth? So, you didn't have to go through a whole lot of red tape.
I mean, actually, we kind of did. And people, it goes by county, I would say. So there's some counties. Originally, we were licensed in Creek County when I was living in Mounds, and I subleased a kitchen space that was already licensed, and I would go in there and work when they were closed. So that allowed me to, have a licensed commercial space without having my own place. And that was easy breezy. It felt way too easy, And then when I was told, that there had been other kombucha makers that tried to get commercialized in Tulsa County, and they were just told it's impossible. Like, you're not going to get licensed in Tulsa County. And so, I love a good challenge. So I was really prepared for that. We partnered with some experts that had, data already, prepared and reports that we could submit with our licensing that really just shut down any of those concerns or questions. A lot of it is just a lack of education, a lack of understanding of what the product actually is, what the processes are, and the market of it, period. So we're still a few years ahead of that, being where we're at right now. And so those challenges have not been unexpected, but been prepared for, and I feel like we've dealt with them pretty well so far. So we got licensed, but it wasn't easy. It was not impossible. I think we got a lot of good feedback when we were doing the farmers markets and stuff. It really allowed me to A/B test things and do a lot of market research and just really listen to all the feedback we were getting. So that's how I knew we had hit, product market fit. And then when we were going to open up a tap room, the feedback we got was just we've been waiting for a place that's just NA, and as you might know, in other parts of the country, there's lots of just strictly NA bars, but there's not anything like that here, let alone a kombucha tap room. And so, the feedback was, and it was kind of cool that we get to do something that's a first, and we're really excited to see where that goes and be able to continue to use, our tap room and the kava bar to get feedback from our customers and test things out before we roll them out to market.
That's really neat. And also, tell us a little bit about giving back through your cells and facility.
Yeah, we, have given back as much as we can right now, but I can't wait to be able to do so much more. But I knew that, with part of my success, it was really important to be able to take some of that and pour it back into the things that mattered the most to me. So being able to help, disadvantaged teens that are in situations, or domestic violence survivors and their kids, or just those suffering from poverty. So being able to, give back to our local community angel tree. I was 1 year my kids were on the angel tree list, and the next year we were donating bikes and tricycles and everything for all the kids on that angel. And there's just nothing that feels better than that.
There's not.
No. So I can't wait to do a lot more, but we're doing as much as we can.
I fully
right now.
understand that.
Yeah.
Being able to give back and make a difference and knowing that you are changing another kid's life, that you will never know them, you will never meet them, but knowing just that one little thing that you've done can make a huge difference.
Yeah, because I know it did for me.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Do you have any sort of general advice for people who want to start a business and are sort of starting from a, not a very, what should we say, advantaged or privileged situation?
Yeah. I think the best thing I did was I really blocked out all the noise. I didn't really have much of a choice given the fact that I was in a back brace and then a knee brace. And I really feel like God was you're going to sit still and listen for a minute, because I don't sit still very well either. But I think blocking out the noise and just really listening to what, your gut and your heart is telling you you're supposed to do, and not listening to any other outside sources, not absorbing any of that doubt, and just staying very headstrong and know this is what I'm going to do and block everything else out.
Do you feel like some of that came from your childhood?
For sure.
I know for me, when somebody would tell me you can't do something, I'd be like, okay, watch. Don't tell me I can't do something. Yeah. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of that came from that, yeah.
Well, I think this is just your business and what you're going to be providing Tulsa is remarkable, and
thank you.
A lot of people are going to benefit from your story.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you sharing that with us, and just bringing health. I know that, for the last couple of years, that's what everybody's talking about, is how can we get ourselves healthy?
Yeah.
What is it that we need to do? And just being able to drink something that's going to help you with your inflammation, your gut health, is truly remarkable. And I know a lot of people are going to benefit from that.
Yeah, I love the idea of making it less complicated and less overwhelming. As someone who didn't always live a healthy lifestyle, when you go to start making those choices, you're like, do I throw everything in my house away and, buy all these supplements and do all the things? And it can be really overwhelming, and then people don't stick with it because that just is not sustainable.
And it is overwhelming, and it's costly, and you do just stand there going, what do I get rid of?
And there's so much advice out there and so many different types of supplements, and it's like you could really just spiral, So if you can just start with one simple thing, grabbing a kombucha instead of a pop, it becomes an incredible snowball effect, because the better you feel, the better you want to feel.
The better you want to feel, and the more you want to do to live a healthier lifestyle.
So then you pick up that next good habit and put down the next bad one. And before you know it, your whole life is different. So I think that it can be simplified and not have to be so overwhelming and crazy or even expensive.
And will you be having special events here? What is it that you really want to accomplish in this space?
Yeah, a few different things. With our space is so big and quirky, that we have a few different opportunities. We do have a private event space, and I would love to, be able to host some of our own events that would be centered around, different alternative styles of healing, probably. But we'll also be able to sublease that space out to other people that want to throw private events, and we hope, a lot of those will align with our mission as well, so we can cross-promote those with our customers. But also creating an environment where people can come and have a social experience, whether that be one that's more loud and light and, still family friendly over in the kombucha tap room, or one that's a little more relaxed and quiet and moody in the kava bar, and have that third space that people are looking for that isn't centered around alcohol. So you can enjoy it and then also not regret your time that you spent there.
I like that.
Yeah.
I definitely like that. So go ahead.
I was going to ask if there's anything else you'd like to say that we haven't covered yet that you'd like our listeners to know.
I don't think so.
Any encouraging words for some single moms out there that?
Yeah, I know that so much of the time when you're in it is spent thinking that there's no way you could do it on your own, or what am I going to do? How? Yeah. And it sucks that it has to get to the point I remember literally saying, I will have nothing and live under a bridge before I live like this for one more day. And it sucks that it has to get to that point for you to be like, I don't know how I'm going to make it, but I can't do this anymore. And so to know that you don't have to, you can do it on your own. And everybody's is going to look a little bit different on how you end up being able to do it. But if you're determined to get out of it and do it, you will. There'll be a way.
Well, you were truly an inspiration for those of us that grew up in trauma, for single moms. I was a single mom myself for a few years, so I know that feeling of just feel like you have to do it all yourself, and you're going to make it no matter what. And your story is truly inspirational.
Well, thank you.
And I
as well.
Really appreciate you coming and joining us and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode in which we've talked about how childhood trauma can impact us for years, how we can take control of our own thoughts, trust our instincts, and rewrite our stories. Remember, you're allowed to break the cycle and rebuild. So join us here each week, my friend. You're sure to get a smile. From lessons learned to mishaps, the adventures go on for miles. Here on
The Professor and Heather Ann.
Listening to The Professor and Heather Ann.